Hello and welcome to King of Our Nightmares, a Stephen King podcast. I'm Jeremy,
I'm Noah.
and we are going to talk about Stephen King's first fiction story, Carrie. What is it called in Germany?
Carrie.
Is it actually?
It is Carrie.
Well, we'll be talking about some things because Noah's read most of the German translations, which are notoriously bad.
Yeah.
And I have not. This is so. When Noah and I first became friends, we talked a lot of Stephen King. Talked some Star Wars. We talked Stephen King, specifically The Dark Tower. But then it became apparent when I realized that Noah had read every Stephen King book, and I had not. I've read quite a few, but I have not read a whole hell of a lot of them. By the way, these are going to not only be live streams, but we're going to say whatever the fuck we want to because these books are pretty explicit. So no,
we have to.
You have to. So why don't we talk about what Carrie is about? The novella that got that became a novel, kind of
a novel. Yeah. You want me to give like a synopsis of the story?
Yes.
Ooh. How do I do it? Okay.
I can do it.
The book is all about Carrie White, a 17-year-old
senior in high school who's an outcast. Her mother's a crazy religious nut. The girls in school bully her. She's just an outcast. And the book opens, she has her first period in the showers at school, and the girls throw tampons at her. She doesn't know, because she's so sheltered by her psychotic mother, what menstruation is, and she thinks she's dying. And then we find out that she's psychic and has telekinetic powers. And the book is about how one of the girls feels really bad for what she did, so she convinces her boyfriend to take Carrie to the prom. The main bully doesn't like this, and she and her psychotic boyfriend plan a horrible prank on Carrie, and all hell breaks loose. Carrie is sort of two books. The first is the story of Carrie White, the narrative, and the other is other accounts of what happened to Carrie White and the town that she lived in. And we're going to get into spoilers in this. These are analysis. She kills like half the town.
Yeah.
And just an uncontrollable telekinetic rage, and she burns the town down. She kills most of the high schoolers at the prom. She just kills like everyone. And it's interesting, but there are some problems with this book, and I want to bring this up with Carrie. Stephen King at this time, this was the early to mid 70s, about 74, correct? 73, 74.
Yeah, 74 when this came out.
Stephen King was a poor writer. They just got out. He had just started a family with his wife Tabitha, and he would write stories for magazines so that they could eat. Carrie was one of those where he wrote it as a short story, thought it was garbage, threw it away. His wife pulled it out of the garbage and said, "Hey, why don't you work this out?" So Carrie's based off of two girls he knew growing up that died at very young ages.
Yes.
One committed suicide and the other one was like murdered or something like that. Or they may have both committed suicide. I don't know. But he was working through some demons with that. And that's how Carrie White was formed. This book is 50-50. When it's good, it's really good. But when we get to all the magazines on telekinetic energy and stuff, it gets a little tedious.
Yes, because another behind-the-scenes thing. after his wife convinced him to pull it out of the garbage, finish it, it was a novella. It was not quite a novel, not quite a short story. And when he went to a publisher, they said, you know what, okay, we want to publish this. This is decent enough, but it's very short. You have to make it longer. So instead of like reworking the story or anything, he just inserted a bunch of like news articles and like quotes and whatever.
Yeah, and
spread it out.
some of them feel okay, but others feel really out of
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, some of them
especially-
do like good foreshadowing.
Yeah, some of it's not so good foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I call this the reverse The Stand, where The Stand originally, when we talk about The Stand, had to have pages cut. It was too long. It would cost too much to publish. So they decided, okay, we're just gonna cut pieces out of it. With this, had to add things. And there's some interesting things because this has been made into like several movies.
Yeah.
Only one of which is worth watching, which is the De Palma film, which is pretty different in certain regards. But there's a few things I really wanted to talk about in this. The first is just the backstory into Carrie's mother's psychosis, which is not a lot to it, and Noah's already frozen. We're off to a good start. 7 minutes in.
My internet is garbage. Sorry, people.
It is what it is. I mean, Noah's in Germany. I'm in California. You know, we're doing the best. We're doing the best we can right now. With her mother has this thing against the world, and they're all going to go to hell, and they're all sinners. And she has the prayer closet where she'll lock Carrie in there to pray her sins away, which is disturbing on so many regards. Like to the point where she's like she's been forced to go to the bathroom in the prayer closet, and so it's fucked up. And this poor girl has just been horribly abused by not just her mother, but like her classmates have just bullied her to no end. And she just has enough. And it's about a girl. Well, she starts to figure out she has psychic powers on the way home from school after her period incident. She gets sent home, and she throws a kid off of his bike. And then she just starts working out her psychic powers. And she finally just loses it at the prom when the bullies dump a bucket of pig's blood on her and then drop the bucket on her date, kills him. And then she just loses it and just starts throwing people. A bunch of people burn to death. People get electrocuted. It's sad. It's a tragic story. Because you start rooting for her to just kill all these people, which is such a weird thing to think about. Is that you're like, yeah, I hope you kill all of them. They deserve it. It's interesting. Stephen King has this ability for you to cheer for some of the most heinous things. This is one of those examples. And he really writes a misfit well, I think.
Yeah.
And that's one of his strong suits. And in this era, he was good at writing kids and teenagers. They feel natural. Yeah. It's just another character I want to bring up is Susan Snell, who's the girl that feels guilty about bullying Carrie, and so she has her boyfriend take Carrie to the prom, and there's a weird pregnancy subplot in this that I found fascinating, where she and her little high school sweetheart, you know, they lose their virginities together, and it's kind of romantic. And then Carrie makes her have an abortion. It's the beginning of Stephen King weirdness. Kind of. She has her period, but I think it's to symbolize that was her punishment. Because Carrie can't differentiate friend from foe by the end. And yeah, it's an interesting story. Carrie is so short that there's not a lot to discuss with it. I forgot how short Carrie was. This is only my second time reading it, and I read it back in high school, maybe middle school. This is one of the early King books I read. So it's just hard for me to remember certain things with it. What I initially thought because like I knew what was coming in this, which with a lot of these books coming up I've never read. So it's going to be interesting to get first thoughts. But this was like returning to an old story, which is always an interesting thing. And you just have different perspective each time. And I appreciate Carrie for what it is, but it's definitely an author's first novel.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's not a polished gem, but I get why it appealed in the 70s. It was the right book at the right time for Stephen King. Noah, what do you think of Carrie?
I pretty much agree with you. Like, I enjoy it, definitely. But yeah, you can tell that's his first try. It's not really polished. And I mean, it has an interesting structure that makes it different from his other books.
Yes.
But then again, you can also criticize it at some points in the story.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say what's interesting, most of like the Stephen King, his standard stuff is already in here. We have the outcast main character, we have this supernatural element, we have the destruction of a little town in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
Which all that's missing is an alcoholic author.
Yeah, that's true. He hasn't
religious fanatics.
What's that?
Religious fanatics. Yeah, that's also in here.
I will say that it was hard to read this time around, being someone who survived their town being burned to the ground. That was a little rough to read on this reread. I forgot that happened, because that's not something, with the exception of the terrible made-for-TV movie, that's not something they do in the Carrie films. But do we want to talk about the films briefly? I mean, very briefly, because
yeah, we probably should mention them.
So Brian De Palma did the famous film in the late 70s, which is, I think, is a solid film as far as Stephen King theatrical releases are. It's one of the better ones.
Yeah, Stephen King himself even said, "Oh yeah, that's better than my book."
Yeah, in certain ways, they changed certain things. How Carrie's mother dies is pretty symbolic and works really well on the screen. That's one of the main things that stands out to me. Then they made a sequel to it in the 90s called Carrie 2 The Rage, or The Rage Carrie 2.
Rage Carrie 2.
Which I find a really funny film. It's awful. That's when Stephen King, I think he checked out at that point with the Carrie property. Then they made a made-for-TV film that's really bad, that pulls more from the novel, pulls the most from the novel, but has a distinct it was supposed to be a TV pilot, but never got picked up, and Carrie survives at the end of it, which is bizarre and doesn't really work. And she and Sue Snell are on the run. That was going to be the show.
What?
Uh-huh.
I didn't know how this remake ended.
Oh yeah, that's a thing. It's bad though. Then they remade it, and it was literally, they got the writer who wrote the screenplay for the De Palma film, and I think he just printed out the De Palma script and gave it to them. And so they had another guy.
Did they actually?
Are you there, dude?
Did they actually? Yeah, I'm here. All right, internet again. Did they actually get the same writer, or did they just use his script?
He was
because I remember it was pretty much the exact same story.
Yeah,
Really?
it's almost a shot-for-shot remake. It reminds me a lot of the terrible Gus Van Sant Psycho remake, where that was literally intentionally a shot-for-shot remake. The only difference is terrible acting for one thing, and also Vince Vaughn screaming "fuck" at the top of his lungs after the shower scene, and running around like an idiot. Um, yeah, it's basically the De Palma film with cell phones, but that's not used well. The technology in it to modernize
No.
it is not. It's not done very well at all. There's some good effects in
No.
it. No, did you say no to the effects?
No, I said no to the cell phones and the stuff not being well done because the story hardly works in like modern day.
Yeah, no, it's a product of the '70s and its tone and the structure. It's yeah, the film of Carrie is one of the best ends to the new Hollywood era of filmmaking. I think it's solid. Um, yeah, that's Carrie. That's pretty much it. It's a solid story. It's not his best. It's definitely not his worst.
No, there's so much worse.
There's no Gwendy in it.
Don't remind me of Gwendy, please.
We got years before we have to start talking Gwendy.
Yeah.
I should have named
For
this
those of you who don't
podcast
know,
Gwendy Boys.
the Gwendy Boys podcast.
Because we all know Gwendy is the greatest character of all time. She's the Ahsoka of
The Stephen universe.
Stephen King universe. She is the Dark Tower. That's my theory for Gwendy 3. She is the human embodied
space.
Dark Tower. Yeah. And it's in space. She's gonna fly out with Madrin and it. Watch, she's gonna like cry when Madrin dies in it. No one knows what we're talking about right now. Small time's probably
Should
confused.
we explain it?
No, we're not gonna explain Madrin until we get to it.
Should we explain what Gwendy is?
No.
Okay.
It's not worth it.
Yeah. You will find out in 5 years when we get to Gwendy.
10 years.
10.
This
20.
is going to take 2 years to read.
Yeah, I mean, King's Bookshelf, I mean, that's like 60 books.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God, dude. It is a lot. And he's like writing 4 a year.
Yeah, the next one is coming out in August or September. This year.
Yeah. Just going to be crazy. I will say I am a big fan of this little collection Barnes & Noble put out, which is a 3-book set with Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, his first 3 novels. It's got the bucket of blood that's dumped on Carrie, and for some reason a bee. I'm not sure why.
Oh, a Shining.
Oh, yeah! Vaguely remember that.
Does it have anything with Salem's Lot? On the back or something?
No.
Oh.
There's...
OSK. Oh, that looks nice.
It does. They also did one of these for the complete uncut version of The Shining, which I have back there. It's the orange book.
The Stand, you mean?
Yeah, I said Shining. I meant
the uncut version of The Shining.
The uncut version where he changes Jack Torrance's name to Stephen King.
Yeah. And where he just insults Stanley Kubrick for like 500 pages.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Oh boy, when we get to Shining.
Yeah. I can't wait to talk about it. I just read The Shining. It's going to be interesting to read it again with Dr. Sleep in mind.
Oh yeah, true. But next up is Salem's Lot.
Yes. Oh,
which we have to pair up with 2 short stories. But they are in Night Shift, his first collection, which we are also going to talk about.
I won't even bother. We'll talk. You can mention them briefly, but we'll talk about them when we talk about Night Shift.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to say, oh yeah, there's an epilogue in short story format.
Night Shift when we talk about the 2000 Children of the Corn sequels.
Oh, so much fun to talk about. And this episode is so short because it's like Carrie. That's his first. It's decent.
It's good. I would say it's good, with the exception of the. I keep wanting to call them interludes because of reading. They are, but they don't say interlude, which is one of my least favorite things in modern fiction.
Can you imagine Carrie written by Chuck Wendig?
Or Alex White. I call him the refined Chuck Wendig. He only writes alien books where he runs out of adjectives to describe things, so people just say fuck. That's Alex White right there. He's a more refined Chuck Wendig because he doesn't say space diapers, but he just replaces it with fuck. And people love his books. I don't understand it. But this isn't a rant about Alex White podcast. This is Stephen King.
Yeah. But with Carrie, I'm thinking if there's something more we can talk about.
I mean, isn't there a connection to her in the Dark Tower?
Briefly, she is mentioned.
And I don't remember it.
Yeah, it was very quick. It might have been a mention of the Brian De Palma film.
Oh, yeah, like Eddie talks about it.
He also talks about The Shining. Eddie
he also talks about Star Wars.
Yeah. He's the expert in pop culture.
Because, yeah, we'll get to that when we talk about drawing of the Three and Wastelands.
Yeah, that's going to be fun when we do Dark Tower in, like, publication history.
Oh, God, when we don't deal with the Dark Tower for years at a time. It'd be like when I read it the first time.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention Carrie. The psychotic boyfriend of the main bad guy in this.
Oh, he's weird.
He's weird as hell.
He's weird for Stephen King villains. Because he's into her because she's into him because he's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why he likes her. Because he stops liking her because he's a psychopath. He gets off more beating a pig to death with a sledgehammer than he does having sex with her. And he beats her. And like he forces himself on her.
Yes.
It's disturbing.
It is.
They both get killed.
Yeah.
And
in the movie he's played, if I'm not wrong, he's played by John Travolta.
Yes, he is. Which is weird.
Yeah.
John Travolta was really big at the time.
Yeah.
That's that disco era Travolta.
But all I can think of now with Travolta is like The Fanatic or something.
Stop it. Fred Durst's take on mental health problems.
Yeah.
Who's
in the house?
Oh God!
Great film, masterpiece. You all need to watch it.
You don't mention Pulp Fiction. You mentioned The Fanatic.
Yeah, The Fanatic.
Thank you. Battlefield Earth.
Oh.
When he produced it, he calls the main character Rat Brain.
Oh man.
This is pretty much. Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about Miss Jordan, the PE teacher that feels bad and then gets thrown and gets a bloody. Yeah, because that brings up something where the thing with Carrie, the ending is actually, honestly, it's not just that Carrie dies that's tragic, it's the town dies. And people kind of give up. It's interesting. It's not a happy ending, but it's not a Bachman ending. Which when we get to like Rage, for instance, we'll talk about the Bachman stuff. Bachman stuff. We talk about the Regulators. The end.
You haven't even read it yet, but I told you what it is.
I know. I can't wait to read it. But yeah, the town just dies. People leave it. People quit. People feel guilty.
Yeah, which is a thing that's gonna pop up in a bunch of Stephen King books, like in the very next one, like with the town being pretty much destroyed.
Yeah, when we talk about the wonderful Salem's Lot.
Which
But,
I need to read again.
Me too. Once I finish, I'm in the middle of The Godfather right now,
Mhm.
but that's the next book I'm tackling because it's significantly longer than Carrie. It's
Yeah.
twice the length.
You know what a really good joke is? When King wrote Carrie, like his publisher told him, "Yeah, this is nice, but you have to write something a little bit longer." And then Stephen King, most of his books are like 800-page monster.
Well, I mean, Under the Dome.
It's like over 1,200 pages.
Yeah, it's long. Or Insomnia is really long too, if I'm not.
Oh, that's also 800 pages. Yeah.
And Desperation, because Matthew, our friend, the Geeks Addict, was like, Stephen King, he's the guy who writes those giant books, right? I had to show him that not all of them are long, but in recent years, they're all pretty long, unless they're the hard case crime stuff.
Yeah, which he should write more of because they are good and short.
Yeah. This breaks the rule, though. I have a rule with Stephen King. When you hit about 400 or 500 pages, rape happens. That's a thing. It is a thing in his books, especially 80s stuff. I think of It.
Yeah, the famous scene.
The infamous scene we won't talk about on here.
Yeah,
All right,
not yet.
But I think The Stand.
Mm.
Dark Tower.
Yeah, and
Well,
if you
that's not
think
true because there's near that in in Gunslinger.
yeah,
I
but
think
if you
there's
think
that in every single one of his Dark Tower books, except for Wind Through the Key. Actually, no. Well, that deals with domestic violence. I don't know. Maybe it's implied.
But if you think Stephen King is bad when it comes to like rape and stuff, we should read Richard Lehman books because that's gonna give you a heart attack.
I don't want to. I don't want to deal with that at all. I've already read some Clive Barker.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much it for our inaugural episode of Killer Nightmares. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll be continuing in this volume of it, and we'll be reading Salem's Lot. What's that called in German?
Let me get it. This one is really fascinating because it's grammatically wrong in every language. That's not a joke. So here is a hardcover of it, a collector's edition. Brennen muss Salem, which translates to burn must Salem. That's not how you write it in German. That's not how you write it in English. But here it's also a spoiler.
How would you write it? Salem Beneth
Salem muss brennen. Salem must burn.
Okay.
Like obviously, and it's grammatically wrong. It's a spoiler for the ending. So
yeah.
Like,
but I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. I almost left the studio.